So today we are factoring to solve equations. So what we've been doing up until this point is we've just been factoring something called expressions. Expressions have no equal sign. So you don't solve anything, you just factor, you get your parentheses, you're done. Factoring to solve equations means you have an equal sign and your goal is to factor but then keep going and say what x equals and finish the problem. So this is going to help us on our quiz because factoring is still the skill that we're doing today. We're just going to take factoring a little bit further than we would on the quiz. Okay, so I'm going to start you off on some problems. Leave a couple lines up here and we're going to do some examples. And then we're going to go back up here and just write down the most important part of factoring to solve, okay? So here's our first problem we're going to do. We're going to have x squared minus 4x minus 32 equals 0. So this problem should look like, yeah, this is a factoring problem. The only difference is we would have done a problem like this before, and now we have something on the end. That's where it would have looked before, and now we've got the equal 0 on the end. So this is a trinomial. It's got the three terms. It does not have a number in the front. So how are we going to factor this? Not a GCF, because it doesn't have a number in the front, right? So it doesn't have a GCF.
Oh, 0 multiplies to be negative 32, adds to be negative 4.
Yep, so we're going to do the x thing, and we're going to see what multiplies to be negative 32 and adds to be negative 4. So the calculator trick that we're doing is we're hitting the y equals button, and we're doing negative 32 divided by x, and then I'm hitting second graph. And what did you say the numbers were? Negative 8 and 4, okay? And so when I write this in the factored form, I write x minus 8, x plus 4, okay? I'm going to stick the equals 0 on there. So in the factored form, if we were only factoring like we had been doing, we would have written the problem like this, we would be done. Now, when you're solving an equation, you say, if I was to plug a number in for x, then plugging a number in would make this whole set of parentheses equal one number. And plugging a number in here would make this whole set of parentheses equal one number. And I would end up with one number times another number equals 0. That's what I would end up with. How do you multiply numbers together and get 0 as an answer? How does that happen? What would one of the numbers have to be if 0 is an answer? One of the numbers would have to be 0, okay? So we're going to write that in our notes. If this is a number times a number equals 0, that's what this is, a number times a number equals 0, then one of these numbers has to be 0. If we have a number times a number equals 0, then one of these numbers has to be 0. And that's what factoring to solve assumes, is that one of these numbers has to equal 0. So maybe it's that whatever I get when I plug in x minus 8, whatever I plugged in for x, maybe that equaled 0. So I'm going to say x minus 8, maybe this is the one that equaled 0. And how do I solve for x? How do I get rid of the 8? I'm going to add it to the other side. Okay, so that would be x equals 8. So maybe the number that I plugged in was 8. If I plugged in 8, then 8 minus 8 is 0, and 8 plus 4 is 12. Then maybe I did 0 times 12 is 0. Maybe that's the way that I did the answers. Okay? The other option is that x plus 4 could have been 0. That's the other option. So how do I solve for x here? How do I get rid of the 4? Subtract 4. X equals negative 4. Okay, the other option is I plug in negative 4 right here and I get negative 12. I plug in negative 4 right here and I get 0. So maybe I had negative 12 times 0 equals 0. So those are my two options. Maybe I plugged in 8 and got 0 times 12 is 0. Maybe I plugged in negative 4 and I got negative 12 times 0 is 0. Those are my two options. And so I say that these are my solutions. So this is different from what we were doing before because we factor, but we don't stop there. I say if my two factors were x minus 8 and x plus 4, then my answers are positive 8 and negative 4. Okay, let's try another one. For this one, I'm going to do k squared plus 7k plus 12 equals 0. So how do I do this one?
See what multiplies by 12 adds to 7.
Okay. Well, multiplies to 12 adds to 7. Three and 4. Okay, so if I write this in the factored form, I get k plus 3, k plus 4, so k plus 3 could equal 0. That's one option. The other option is k plus 4 could equal 0. So if I want to get the k alone, how do I get rid of the 3? I subtract it. So k equals negative 3. How do I get rid of the 4? Subtract it. K equals negative 4. Okay. So if my factors were k plus 3 and k plus 4, then my answers were negative 3 and negative 4. I'm done. Okay. For this one, we're going to try b squared plus 5b equals 24. So we can't factor this the way that it looks right now. We can only factor problems if they equal 0. So what do we have to do with the 24 first? Subtract the 24. Okay, so that becomes 0. Can the 24 subtract from the b squared or subtract from the 5b? No. How do you know it can't subtract from those? Doesn't have a b on it. Okay, so I'm going to write b squared, and then what should I write? Okay, b squared plus 5b minus 24 equals 0. Okay.
And then you're going to see what multiplies to be negative 24 as
what multiplies to be negative 24, what adds to 5. So I'm going to do negative 24 divided by x. And Caitlin already found it. Negative 8 and 3. Oop, you're close. So the signs were wrong. Is what Caitlin figured out. So it should be negative 3 and positive 8, yeah. Okay, so we're going to write b minus 3, b plus 8. Okay? And then what do we do? B minus 3, b plus 8 equals 0. Okay? And then what do I do to make b alone and get rid of the negative 3? I'm going to add 3. So b equals 3. Okay. So if my factors are b minus 3 and b plus 8, then my answers are b equals positive 3 and b equals negative 8. So Zion noticed a pattern here. Did anyone else notice the pattern with the answers?
It's just the opposite of what the factors are.
It's just the opposite what of what the factors are.
Opposite sign.
Opposite sign. So if the factor said x minus 8, then the answer is positive 8. If the factor said x plus 4, the answer is negative 4. If factor said k plus 3, the answer is negative 3. Factor said k plus 4, answer is negative 4. So whatever the factor says, the answers are the opposite. Okay. All right, so the first thing that we're going to write up here is to make sure that when you start, the problem equals 0. It has to equal 0. It can't equal something else. You have to have all the terms on one side. So make sure the equation equals 0. Then we factor. Then we solve factors, and maybe we could say opposite signs. Does that make sense? That's what we just noticed. Flip signs. Flip signs. So you can phrase it whichever way you need to phrase it so that your notes make sense. So we made sure the equation equals 0, then we factor it, then we solve the factors. Okay? All right, let's try another one. So this one says 9n squared equals 16. So first step, we have to make it equal 0 because we're going to solve by factoring. So we have to make it equal 0. So how do I do that? Subtract the 16 over. Okay. So now it equals 0. So we have 9n squared minus 16 equals 0. And this is not one of those x problems because it's not a trinomial. This is a binomial. It has two pieces. And we know that with the binomials, they're either GCF or they're difference of squares. They got some perfect squares in there. Do you guys see any perfect squares? Do you see any GCFs? 9 and 16, these are both perfect squares. So if this was a difference of squares problem, how would we do it? This would be 3 and this would be 4. Okay, so we're going to do two sets of parentheses, okay? And Caitlin said 3n minus 4. What's the other parenthesis? 3n plus 4. Now, this is the first problem we've had where the parentheses look like this. The other parentheses didn't have a number in front of the n. So for this one, we're actually going to do the work to solve it to see what happens when there's a number in front of the n. Okay? So I'm going to say 3n plus 4 equals 0. 3n minus 4 equals 0, because I want to make sure that the little trick that we figured out works on these ones. Okay? So if I want to get the n alone, how do I get rid of the 4 first? So for this one, we would add the 4 over. And if we're doing this one, we would minus the 4 over. So we got 3n equals negative 4 for one of them. And then for this one, we got 3n equals positive 4. Okay? And then if we wanted to get the n alone, what do we do with the 3? We divide by 3. Okay? So n equals what? 4/3 and negative 4/3. Okay, so if you have a number in front of your x or in front of your n or whatever, you're going to have a fraction. You're still going to use this part and you're still going to change your sign, but you're going to have your fraction. Say that again? We did bottoms up, so we're undoing bottoms up. Yeah, that was good to notice. So we're doing fronts down, maybe? Yeah. We're undoing bottoms up. That was good to notice, yeah. So this is positive 4 divided by 3. This is negative 4 divided by 3. So it's still doing the opposite sign thing. It's just taking this number and moving it to the bottom. Okay, let's try some more problems. Make sure that we're good. Let's try this one. X squared minus 4x equals negative 6x plus 48. This one really does not equal 0. So what should we do? We can't divide anything. Our first goal before we get it to equal 0 is going to be to add or subtract stuff to the other side. Oh, combine like terms. So how could we get our like terms together? Add the 6x to the other side. So we're going to get the 6x over with the 4x. And then we're going to subtract the 48. So the goal that we're doing is we're getting all of this stuff over to the other side. Okay, so that's all zeroed out.
So you'll get x squared plus 2x minus 48.
X squared plus 2x minus 48. Okay, so these two were like terms. We combined those to get 2x. This one was not like terms. We just stuck it on the end. Okay, so we've got a trinomial.
Do you see what multiplies to be negative?
What multiplies to negative 48 and adds to 2. Multiplies to negative 48 and adds to 2. Multiplies to negative 48, adds to 2. Eight and negative 6. Okay, so what are the factors?
And then the answer is going to be x equals negative 8 and then x equals.
Okay, so once we write it in parentheses, we don't have to do the work to show the answer. We just know it's going to be opposite sign, opposite sign. Yeah. R squared plus r minus 22 equals 2. Subtract the 2. Wait, this would be negative 20? Are you sure? Okay. So okay. So we made it equal 0. What kind of problem is this one? Slide divide. Can you just start doing slide divide right away? 10 and negative 24. Is this a GCF problem? Does it have a GCF? No. Because the R in the middle, right? Yeah, these two look like that you could take a GCF out, but the R in the middle kind of ruins it. Okay, so we're going to multiply what? And what do we get? Negative 240. Okay, and the bottom would be the 1 in front of the R, right? Okay, so we're looking for what multiplies to negative 240, but adds to 1. Yeah. 16 and negative 15. R plus 16, R minus 15. Okay, but those are not the parentheses we should have, right? We got to fix them. What do we do with the numbers? We're not there yet. Not there yet. Be careful. Not there yet. Oh, but we do need an equal 0. Divide by 10. Okay. So 16 over 10. And what fraction is that? 8, yeah, 8 over 5. Okay, so the top and the bottom could be divided by 2. So 8 over 5. What about the second fraction? 3 over 2. So the top and the bottom could be divided by 5. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Okay. Now, if you didn't want to do that in your head, you could always say alpha y equals and do 16 over 10, and your calculator does it for you, 8 over 5. Alpha y equals 15 over 10, and your calculator would do it for you, 3 over 2.
And then you have to bottom.
And then we have to bottoms up.
So you get 5 over
Okay. Now, the nice part about these ones, these bottoms up ones, and Zion, you notice this, is that it was kind of the reverse of the bottoms up. So if you want to see the answers, don't look here, look here. So look before you do the bottoms up, and then tell me what the answers are. So do your opposite signs and do your answers here. So what are the two fraction answers? What's this fraction answer? Flip the sign. So it would be negative 8/5. So R equals negative 8/5 and positive 3/2. So negative 8 divided by 5, positive 3 divided by 2. You can see it in the final answer, but it's a little bit easier to see it right here before you did bottoms up. Okay. Do you guys want to do more, or are you ready to practice? The factoring's not new. Same factoring you've been doing. The only difference is the answers. Final answers are different. No. You don't like the jokes? I mean, corny's fine. Man, didn't expect to be shot down for my jokes today.